In our previous lives, my sister and I were adopted by two different families. My adoptive mother was very open-minded. She let me perm my hair in elementary school, had plastic surgery done in middle school, and pushed me to marry the wealthy heir of J City right after college. My sister's adoptive mother, on the other hand, was very strict. To prevent her from being with a delinquent, she married her off to a low-paid, gentle professor. Envious of my extravagant wealth, my sister, who was a doctor, caused me to miscarry when I was pregnant and hospitalized. Upon waking up, my sister and I found ourselves back on the day we were adopted. This time, she eagerly grabbed my adoptive mother's hand, wanting to swap our lives with me. Little did she know that the open-minded adoptive mother she envied was the most terrifying devil to me. 1. I've been reborn, I thought incredulously as I looked at my still chubby little hands. Didn't my sister kill me on the operating table? How could heaven give me another chance at life? 2 middle-aged women stood at the orphanage door. At first glance, I saw Cecilia, the adoptive mother who took me in my previous life. She was still so young and beautiful, every move exuding a seductive charm. The other was Daphne, the adoptive mother who took in my sister in the previous life. She had a stern and rigid face, looking very strict. In my previous life, both my sister and I were attracted to Cecilia, and it was she who chose me between the two of us. My sister was reluctantly adopted by Daphne. Cecilia and Daphne were neighbors. After being adopted by Cecilia, she basically let me do whatever I wanted. She told me that the most important thing for a girl is her appearance. So she had me get plastic surgery from a young age. And by the time I was 18, I had grown into a stunning beauty. My sister, on the other hand, was strictly controlled by Daphne. She not only forced her to study hard every day, but also prevented her from dating bad boys, eventually forcing her to take the path arranged by her family and become a doctor. My sister was extremely envious of me. She thought it was because I followed Cecilia. Cecilia had me get plastic surgery, so I had the opportunity to marry Yousef, the prince, and enjoy the extravagant wealth she could only dream of. While she, on the other hand, was controlled by Daphne all her life, becoming Daphne's puppet, and unable to be with Zachary, the bad boy she loved most. Thinking of this, my abdomen still ached slightly. I couldn't forget that my own sister, with a cold surgical knife, raised it against me. Nor could I forget her voice, like a demon's whisper. Sister, why can you marry the prince and even have his child? While I can't even be with Zachary. Why can you have extravagant wealth, sister? While I can only be a doctor. We were born to the same mother. Sister, why did choosing the wrong adoptive mother lead our lives in opposite directions? We look so alike, sister. Let me replace you and live your extravagant life. I didn't struggle because I didn't want to live either. It's just that my sister didn't expect that before her plan could be carried out, before she could enjoy the so-called extravagant life, she would end her own life by accident. Coming back to my senses, the orphanage director asked me and my sister with a kind smile, "Flora, Gloria, which of you wants to choose who will be your mother?" Before he could finish speaking, my sister rushed over and hugged Cecilia's leg. Her eyes flashed with a sharp light. "Sister, don't compete with me. Cecilia is my mother." Looking at her eyes, I knew that it wasn't just me who had been reborn. Janet smiled. "Okay, I won't compete with you." I walked over to Daphne and took her hand. 2. At first, she was excited. She thought she had finally escaped the orphanage and was about to start a new life. After all, compared to Cecilia, Daphne was a very capable and successful businesswoman. But then Daphne forced her to study, determined to cultivate her into a well-educated young lady. However, my sister didn't like this kind of life at all. She had been confined since she was a child and considered Daphne her enemy. Even at the dinner table, she wasn't allowed to smack her lips, and Daphne controlled her in every aspect. In high school, she had a crush on the bad boy, Zachary, and they started dating. But when Daphne found out, she confined her for several days. When she found Zachary again, he told her nonchalantly that he had fallen in love with someone else. That person was me, the seductive and alluring me, personally cultivated by Cecilia. Zachary pointed at me, his eyes filled with deep fascination. "I've fallen for Imogen." Look at her figure, her face. Only a beauty like her is worthy of me. Helena, you should just follow your strict mother and live a good life. Zachary pursued me aggressively for several months. Although I didn't agree, my sister felt humiliated. Since then, my sister has hated me. After high school, she went abroad. When she returned after graduating with a master's degree, Daphne took her to a banquet. At the banquet, she fell in love with Yousef, the prince of J City, at first sight. Just as she was about to pursue him, Daphne once again intervened, telling her that Yousef was not a good match. She glared at Daphne angrily. "Mom, why do you have to break us up every time I fall in love with a man? Do you just hate to see me happy?" My sister didn't listen to Daphne and insisted on pursuing Yousef. But then she discovered that Yousef was already with me. The prince of J City, Yousef, proposed to me in front of the national audience. Imogen, I will love you forever. My sister's eyes turned red with jealousy. She had been trying to harm me secretly, but she hadn't found the opportunity until I was pregnant and gave birth, and was admitted to the hospital where she worked. With a single stroke, she ended the lives of both me and my child. It's just that she didn't expect that before she could pursue Yousef, she had already ended her own life at home. Fate gave us another chance at life, and this time, she chose Cecilia without hesitation. She held my small hand, her eyes filled with undercurrents. "Sister, Yousef is mine this time, and you just be forever confined by that crazy woman Daphne. And I will have a good mother like Cecilia, who will take me for plastic surgery from a young age, and give me the beauty to captivate all men." 3. Yes, Cecilia has an excellent eye for beauty. In my previous life, she had been paying attention to my facial features since I was young. I even had plastic surgery in middle school, which took my beauty to a new level. But how could my sister know the torment of lying on the operating table month after month, the pain of the scalpel cutting through my skin, and the unbearable repeated repairs? By the time I got pregnant in my previous life, I don't know how many times my nose had been repaired. I could smell the stench of rotting flesh from my nasal cavity every day. That was a side effect of my plastic surgery. As for why Cecilia had me get plastic surgery from a young age to maintain my beauty, she naturally had her reasons. Because I was her Yangzhou beauty, a tool for her to make money. My body and my beauty were the capital she used to please those beastly big shots. It's just that my sister didn't know any of this. In her eyes, I was going in and out of high-end places every day, marrying a top-notch wealthy man, and living a heavenly life. Thinking about everything in my previous life, my body couldn't help but tremble. As for Yousef, he was an even more terrifying existence than Cecilia. Since someone is taking my place and walking that hellish path this time, let her be. After all, she chose it herself. 4. I went home with Daphne and became Kara, Daphne's adopted daughter. Daphne was extremely strict with me. She wouldn't let me smack my lips while eat junk food, associate with bad girls, or have a boyfriend. Instead of feeling restricted, I felt a strange sense of happiness. Having lived twice, I had never felt maternal love in my previous life when I was treated as a tool. This time, I was being loved so wholeheartedly. How fortunate I was. Time flew by quickly, and soon we were in high school. My sister in this life, just like me in the previous one, had been getting plastic surgery since she was young, courtesy of Cecilia, and had a beauty that didn't belong to a high school student. As if to prove herself, she was with Zachary again. "Sister," she said, standing in front of me, arm in arm with Zachary like a victor. "Look, he's mine after all." I scoffed inwardly. I never looked up to Zachary, that little hoodlum, and I didn't believe that my sister, who had experienced so much later, would like him. She was just resentful because Zachary had fallen for me in the previous life. "Of course he's yours," I said. "Who else would want to date this little hoodlum?" I looked at her coldly, my eyes filled with mockery. "I know you're jealous of me, sister. Now I have a beautiful face and a devilish figure, and all men will be fascinated by me. It's useless for you to be jealous. In your previous life, your fairy tale life belongs to me now," my sister said in a voice only the two of us could hear. Her meaning was clear. Our lives had been completely swapped at this moment. Zachary didn't hear my sister's words, but he did hear mine. He puffed up like a rooster, angry. With a face like yours, you still dare to look down on me? You ugly bookworm. Hearing this, I couldn't help but smile. So that's how he thought of your face before. I knew my sister must understand, because her expression changed instantly. We were twins, and in the previous life, she hadn't had plastic surgery, and it was with my face that she dated Zachary. Unlike our Janet, she's so beautiful. Zachary looked at my sister's face with a lustful expression, but my sister looked at him with disgust. She didn't care about Zachary at all now. Being with Zachary was just because of her youthful obsession. She gritted her teeth and said to me, "You're just jealous. I'll step on you one day." I picked up my homework and started doing it seriously. What does it matter to me? All I want now is to make sure I don't end up like her in the previous life, failing to get into university and having to study abroad. I must get into a prestigious university with my own ability to repay my adoptive mother's kindness. 5. As it turned out, hard work never betrays those who are dedicated. I was admitted to a prestigious university as I had wished. Daphne hugged me excitedly, her eyes filled with emotion. "Kara, you really didn't disappoint Mom." She truly loved me and sincerely hoped that I could succeed. Daphne never asked for anything. She simply planned the best path for her children. She gave me 2 options. One was to be a doctor, and she could arrange for me to enter the best hospital, and the other was to follow her in running the company. Without hesitation, I chose to study economics and management. The scene of my sister holding a knife and brutally cutting me open in my previous life was still vivid in my mind. I had a shadow and wouldn't choose that profession. As for managing a company, I believed I had the ability. In this life, I, Kara, would definitely not rely on my beauty to charm men, but would use my abilities to make those men look up to me. However, I met Xander at school. Although he was only 4 years older than me, he was about to graduate with a PhD. He was the one Daphne had carefully selected as a husband for my sister in my previous life. He came from a noble family, was handsome, and was a first-class young talent. Although professors were generally poor, he was an exception, earning a lot of money from his books and research. It could be said that Daphne was genuinely good to my sister, and the man she chose was an exceptionally good man. Unfortunately, my sister didn't appreciate it. She thought that I could marry a rich second generation, while she had to marry an ordinary professor. Even if the professor was incredibly handsome, it couldn't compare to the wealth I enjoyed with the Prince of J City. So on the day of her engagement to Xander, she eloped. This made Daphne lose face. When I first heard about this, I had even envied her. While I was living in misery, she was able to live such a peaceful life. It's a pity that she was a fool and didn't cherish it at all. With Xander's personality, even if he didn't love her, he would definitely respect and care for her for the rest of his life. My sister simply didn't understand this. "Classmate, is there something you need?" Xander was not yet the famous professor at that time, but a young doctoral student. He was the school's heartthrob, and many girls chased after him. But I was the only one who stared at him without saying a word. I want to ask you a question." I mustered up my courage and asked him a question about my major, and Xander answered fluently. He was different from people like me who got in through hard work. He was a genius, a true genius. He understood many things with just a glance. "Let me treat you to dinner." I looked at him with a smile. Xander's family was not well off, and I knew this was the most difficult time of his life. Even when eating in the cafeteria, he could only afford the cheapest meals. He looked at me and blushed. No need. But in the end, I insisted on paying. Since that day, I often studied with him, asking him whenever I didn't understand something. After a semester, I became the top student in my major. And because of my occasional treats, Xander didn't have such a hard time during the last part of his studies. I was immersed in the joy of progress, but one day I saw my sister getting out of an old man's car near my home. She was winking at the old man and changed her face as soon as she turned around. "Old man, you're not worthy of taking advantage of me." She shook her clothes as if she had been tainted by something disgusting. She looked up and met my gaze. I didn't want to pay any attention to her, but my sister walked up to me. She was carrying a Chanel bag and wearing a Van Cleef & Arpels bracelet. and her every move was full of ostentation. Sister, look at you now, so poor. Beauty and money, they're all mine. You must be very jealous of me, right? Her eyes sparkled, as if she had already stepped on me. I slightly curled my lips. Jealous of what? Jealous that you're being serviced by old men? Or jealous that you're involved with little hoodlums? Or jealous that you only got into a junior college? My eyes were filled with obvious contempt. My sister was stung by my contempt, and her originally triumphant expression instantly turned into embarrassment and hatred. Sister, everything you had in your previous life is mine now. I don't believe you're not jealous of me. What you're saying now is just trying to save face. My sister wanted to see my expression crack, but I still looked calm. Yes, you're right. So can you just get lost now? I didn't want to talk to her at all. At this moment, she crouched down holding her stomach. I have a stomachache. I thought she was going to play some tricks, so I was about to leave. But then I saw a pool of blood under her. I was startled. Take me to the hospital, or I'll shout that you pushed me right now. My sister looked at me with a ferocious expression. I wasn't afraid of her blackmailing me, and it wasn't a big deal to take her to the hospital. On the way, my sister called Cecilia. Mom, come quickly. I'm at the hospital. When we arrived at the hospital, the doctor examined my sister. The doctor said seriously, "You're pregnant. How can you have sex in the first 3 months? Do you know that you almost miscarried your baby?" What? You're pregnant? Cecilia's eyes widened in disbelief. She slapped my sister. Didn't I tell you to take your medicine? How could you forget when you were fooling around in bed? Cecilia was originally a low-class person, and she could swear without any effort. You dress so seductively every day to seduce men. Didn't I tell you to be careful? Now that you're pregnant, how are you going to seduce the prince? My sister was clearly used to being scolded by Cecilia, and she curled up in pain. Mom, I really took the medicine. I don't know how I got pregnant. She was genuinely afraid of Cecilia, just like me in my previous life. Thinking of how in my previous life, when I was unwilling to help Cecilia use my body to make money, she would give me the cold shoulder, belittle me in various ways, and sometimes even stab me with needles, leaving countless holes on my body. I couldn't help but tremble at the thought. My sister's reaction made me realize that Cecilia was doing the same thing to her this time. But she was more willing, because her biggest hope was to become a rich wife. Cecilia would help her achieve it. Both mother and daughter were greedy and money-hungry, a perfect match. At this moment, my sister seemed to remember something and muttered, "When I broke up with Zachary 2 months ago, we had sex in the back mountains, and I forgot to take my medicine." 6. So it turned out that my sister was pregnant with Zachary's child. I thought that with her personality, her ultimate goal would definitely be Prince Yousef. She should have cut ties with Zachary, that poor boy, a long time ago. I didn't expect them to be so wild, doing something like this after breaking up. Zachary, isn't he just a poor mixed-up kid? Janet, you've let me down so much. I spent so much money on your plastic surgery. Was it for you to get involved with someone like him? Cecilia was furious. I believe that with her personality, if there weren't so many people around, she would have used her methods on my sister long ago. If the child in my sister's belly belonged to some big shot, Cecilia's face would probably be smiling like a chrysanthemum. But since my sister was carrying Zachary's, a small-time hoodlum's child, Cecilia probably wished she could reach in and strangle the child herself. Mom, this child must be aborted. I haven't had a chance to get close to Yousef yet. If he finds out I'm pregnant with someone else's child, won't I have no chance of marrying him? The two of them were in a mess, and no one even cared about me, who was just watching the show. Nonsense. Of course the child must be aborted, but we can't let Zachary off so easily. He slept with my daughter and got her pregnant. He must pay the price. Call Zachary. My sister obediently called Zachary, but I don't know what Zachary said. My sister's face looked a little ugly. Soon Zachary came. What do you want? He asked nonchalantly. You slept with my daughter, and now she's pregnant. What do you think you should do? Cecilia glared at Zachary. What should I do? Have an abortion, of course. Do you expect me to take responsibility? Zachary looked at her indifferently. Auntie, I think you look pretty good too. How about I give you a son too? Zachary looked at Cecilia with a lewd smile. Shut up. Cecilia slapped Zachary angrily. Zachary licked his lips and smiled. Or else. You won't expect me to give you money, will you? A family of gold diggers. What did you say? My sister stood up angrily. Am I wrong? Don't you think I haven't seen you flattering those bosses? Zachary's eyes were full of malice. You don't know whose child this is yet. It must be yours. My sister was furious and wanted to tear Zachary apart. Zachary, let me tell you, even if I have to sell everything I have to give my daughter 200,000 yuan for nutrition. Otherwise, why should she have an abortion for nothing? Cecilia forgot that Zachary wasn't like those face-saving bosses. He was a more shameless hoodlum than both her and her daughter. That sounds good. An abortion costs 200,000 yuan. Then don't have an abortion. Just give birth to the child. And if it really is mine, I'll take responsibility. Although I hated Zachary, I couldn't help but give him a thumbs up when I saw him deal with this mother and daughter. Zachary, Cecilia pointed at him. Do you believe I'll find someone to teach you a lesson? Zachary grabbed Cecilia's wrist and said viciously. Then Auntie, you have to promise that before you find someone to teach me a lesson, I won't hit you first. I never said I wouldn't hit a woman. Why don't you take a punch from me now? The hospital is right here. 7. Cecilia and my sister probably didn't expect Zachary to be so unreasonable. You, get out. Cecilia yelled angrily, pointing to the door of the ward. Zachary walked away nonchalantly, leaving behind the words, Janet, don't take me for a fool. Aha! My sister screamed. She probably never imagined that in this life. Even with her beautiful face and being with Zachary, she would end up like this. Zachary, that kind of immoral scoundrel, wasn't the kind of wealthy man their mother and daughter could manipulate. At this moment, my sister noticed me. Her face was twisted and hideous. Kara, do you think I'm funny? Now that you've seen my joke, are you satisfied? My sister had previously thought she and Zachary were truly in love. In her previous life, Zachary had left her only because of Daphne's intervention. But she never thought that Zachary was actually, as Daphne had said, not a good person at all. I don't know if she felt a little regret at this moment, regretting choosing my life. It's very funny, I chuckled. Your petty tricks against a guy who's been mixing with the wrong crowd since he was young? That's like a small wizard meeting a great wizard. I think you should abort the baby sooner rather than later, lest your belly gets too big and you get caught. Kara, no Flora. I'll definitely be better than you. I'll definitely become the princess of J City. And you'll always be beneath me. My sister seemed to be going crazy. Okay, let's wait and see. Before leaving the ward, I heard Cecilia scolding my sister. Cecilia had always been like this, sweet on the surface but bitter at heart. As long as she didn't get what she wanted, she could be the most vicious person in the world. Xander stayed at the school after graduation. Due to his handsome appearance and humorous teaching style, he quickly became the most popular professor in the school, and many girls had a crush on him. But he didn't accept anyone's affection. When I went out one day, I saw my sister getting into a luxury car. I thought she had been sent to bed by Cecilia again. But when I looked closer, I realized she was getting into Yousef's car. That man wearing sunglasses, looking cool and arrogant. Wasn't he Prince Yousef? When I saw Yousef, I almost lost my soul. It wasn't that I still had feelings for him, but he was a nightmare to me. If Cecilia was the nightmare of my life, then Yousef was the devil in that nightmare, Satan, the messenger of hell. He pretended to love me very much on the outside, as if he wanted to treat me like a treasure. Only I knew that I was never a treasure, but his possession. He tortured me, he ravaged me, he treated me as his tool. He perversely sent me to his father's bed, just to compete with his brothers for the inheritance of his family. I even served the company's shareholders and directors, and they humiliated me, the nominal princess, in various ways. Don't look at Cecilia and Yousef as having such a huge gap in status, but they did the same thing in private. I hated them both immensely, wishing I could send them both to hell. Of course, there was also my good sister, who killed me with a cold scalpel in my previous life. It's just that they got together so quickly in this life. In my previous life, I didn't meet Yousef until I graduated from university, and I knew he fell in love with my face at first sight. As for why he was willing to marry me, it was very likely that he had reached some dirty deal with Cecilia. After all, if he married a girl from a well-matched family, her family would definitely not allow their daughter to be treated like this. My sister probably just had an abortion not long ago, and she was already on another, more dangerous path. The golden cage she had dreamed of in her previous life was actually a real den of evil. The people inside played with women and didn't treat them as human beings. Living inside was worse than being a dog. As someone who had been reborn, I knew a lot of Yousef's secrets. In order to bribe those wealthy and powerful people, he had committed tax evasion, money laundering, smuggling, and these were just the most basic things. When the time was right, I had to send them all to hell. Just thinking about this, I couldn't help but zone out during Xander's class. "Kara, come to my office after class." Xander pointed at me in front of the whole class. I knew he was going to talk to me about zoning out. "What's wrong with you today? I called your name several times, but you didn't react at all. You're not usually like this." Xander's clear brows instantly calmed my anxiety, but I couldn't tell Xander what I had experienced in my previous life. So I casually said, "Professor, you're too handsome. I was a little distracted when I looked at you lecturing." When Xander heard what I said, his face turned red instantly. "You?" Seeing Xander, who was much older than me but still so innocent, I couldn't help but tease him. "Professor, what's wrong with you? Are you shy?" Xander almost fell off his chair in panic. I don't know what he was thinking at that moment, but he suddenly pressed me against the wall, his voice magnetic and low. "Kara, don't joke with me, or I can't guarantee what I'll do." As soon as he said this, both of our faces turned red. "Professor, I still have something to do, so I'll go first." I knew what this ambiguous atmosphere meant, but I hadn't made up my mind yet, so I could only flee. I just didn't know that after I left, Xander looked at me deeply, but I didn't have the heart to think about these things, because 3 months later, my sister gave me an invitation. She was full of pride, and even her tone was arrogant. "Sister, this is the invitation to my engagement party with Yousef. Please come and witness my happiness with Yousef." So soon, I was a little surprised. What had Cecilia done this time to marry off my sister so quickly? Until I saw my sister unconsciously touching her stomach, I was shocked for a moment. It had only been a few months since her last abortion, and she was pregnant with Yousef's child so quickly. "What, are you jealous that I'm marrying Yousef so quickly, sister? I'm not as slow as you were in my previous life, getting pregnant so late. Are you afraid to come? Ilela kuma." I agreed. Of course I would go to the wedding of the scumbag and the evil woman, but I also wanted to give them and Cecilia a big surprise. I called Zachary. 8. I didn't even try to persuade Zachary to come. I just said that Janet was going to marry the Prince of J City. He immediately scoffed. "What, does the prince have such bad taste? He likes buses." He hung up the phone after saying that, but I knew he would come. When it was time for my sister's wedding, she appeared in a custom-made gown, looking luxurious. She stood there arrogantly, like a princess of some royal family. She walked up to me haughtily. "Sister, do you see? This time you can't compare to me. You're not winning over me anymore." I told the truth calmly. "Whether you believe it or not, I've never wanted to compete with you for anything." My sister scoffed. "Now that you're the loser, of course you don't have the right to compete with me. Of course you can say that." She went over and took Yousef's arm, showing off. "Yousef, this is my neighbor's sister. She's always envied me for marrying such a good husband." Yousef, as always, no matter how dirty he was inside, still pretended to love his wife on the surface. "I'm the one who's happy to have such a good wife." The two of them smiled sweetly at each other, like a couple made in heaven, the envy of everyone. Only I knew how much dirt and filth was hidden behind their sweetness. "Sister, are you envious of us?" She was just waiting to see my jealous expression. Unfortunately, after experiencing all that in my previous life, how could I be envious? If it weren't for revenge, I would have wanted to stay far away from them. Soon, the engagement ceremony began, and the two newcomers stood on the stage while the guests below clinked glasses. "Janet, Meeting you is the greatest adventure of my life." Yousef said such words, touching the guests below, but it disgusted me. He said the same thing to me in the previous life. And how did he treat his adventure? To him, I wasn't even a person, just an animal. "Yousef, you are the greatest beauty in my life too." Such a literary scene really needed someone to ruin their greasy and disgusting act. At this moment, a lazy voice sounded. "Janet, you're the greatest beauty in my life. Then what about me? What am I? The father of the child you aborted?" It was Zachary. He had really come to cause trouble. He smashed a table of dishes. Yousef's face changed instantly. "What kind of hooligan are you? Get him out of here." "I'm not a hooligan. I've even rolled around in the back mountains with your fiancé." "Zachary, shut up." My sister was furious. Oh, my little lover, why are you so fierce? Look, you still know my name. You're saying we don't have a thing going on." As soon as Zachary finished speaking, I pressed the remote control on the stage. I had bribed the hotel to do this. Suddenly, the big screen on the stage showed photos of my sister getting out of various luxury cars. And she was hugging a beer-bellied boss and kissing a bald-headed boss. Zachary burst out laughing as soon as he saw it. He looked at Yousef with eyes like he was looking at a green turtle. "Prince, why did you have to fall for someone like her? Do you know whose seed is in her belly?" 9. The guests started to murmur, and some even found excuses to leave. After all, some of them were just my sister's sugar daddies. They had all engaged in power-for-sex transactions with Cecilia. Yousef could use his wife's body to gain benefits in private, but that didn't mean he wanted the world to know about it. Moreover, my sister had deceived him by getting pregnant with a hoodlum's child before marriage. Yousef's eyes were filled with rage. He slapped my sister hard. "You bitch! How could you be so lowly?" The guests who hadn't left immediately took out their phones to record this moment. Seeing that the situation was wrong, Cecilia wanted to run. She didn't have any affection for her daughter. Anyway, she had made enough money by exploiting her. But I wouldn't let Cecilia get away. I shouted, "Zachary, if you want to see what happens to her, stop her quickly." Zachary directly stopped Cecilia and gave her a hard punch. "Don't run." Over here, Yousef was going crazy, slapping my sister repeatedly. "Bitch," my sister cried out in pain. "Yousef, I'm pregnant with your child." By now she was bleeding. But Yousef didn't care and continued to hit her. Seeing her end, I felt no sympathy at all. Because the police were about to arrive soon, I had reported Yousef's family for their corruption and embezzlement, and I had also submitted some evidence. At least the fact that Cecilia used power and sex to launder money was solid evidence. With the memories of my previous life, everything went smoothly. Cecilia and Yousef were taken away with disbelief on their faces. Yousef even shouted that his father was Wyatt, but justice wouldn't let him go. After everything settled down, I walked out of the hotel. I turned around and saw Xander standing in front of me with a bouquet of flowers. "Kara, can you be my girlfriend?" Looking at his cold but pure appearance, I nodded. I knew he was the best person in the world, and he was the person Daphne had carefully chosen. We would definitely be happy together. My sister, as a semi-victim, didn't go to jail, but because she lost her source of income, she actually degraded herself and became a prostitute. Since I had taken revenge, I had no intention of getting involved in her life. It was just that when Daphne heard about this, she was still a little worried. "Kara, it's a good thing I chose you back then." I hugged her and smiled. "Mom, it's a good thing we chose each other. If I had followed Cecilia, no matter how good I was, I wouldn't have had a good ending. It's because both of us are so good that we can become such a good mother and daughter." Daphne rubbed my head. "Good girl. Thank you for listening to Mom all these years." After graduation, I married Xander, and I took over Daphne's company. I became a successful person with both a career and a family. It's just that in the middle of the night, I would always wonder if I hadn't been reborn, I wouldn't have had all this. I was grateful to heaven for giving me a second chance. Many years later, I met my sister again. She was so thin that she was out of shape. When she saw me, she closed her eyes in pain. "Sister, I lost in the end. We were originally of the same blood. Why did we have to fight each other so fiercely? In this battle between sisters, who was the real winner?" I can only say thank you to Daphne for changing my life.